Welcome back. My name's Laura Carstensen. I'm from Stanford University, and I am moderating the second session this morning called Reimagining the Social World Across the Life Course. And this is going to be a great session. I've had an opportunity to get to know our panel and to interact with them a little bit already. And we can really create a vision here that is important, and I think will take us in new directions. Whenever we talk about aging societies, the conversation turns, as it should, to the needs of older adults and the supports that we need to build into the society to deliver that kind of support. There is also good reason to believe that aging societies, long-lived populations, are offering the world an unprecedented opportunity to improve quality of life. Older citizens, compared to their younger counterparts, are relatively emotionally stable, more likely to be appreciative, more likely to feel gratitude, more likely to invest strongly in their families and the people in their lives who mean most to them, more likely to be motivated to engage in meaningful activities. And over historical time, with increases in education, we've seen the capabilities of older populations, older generations increase as well. I was struck by Hiroko's data on walking speed over historical time and how that's going up. Cognitive performance is increasing over historical time. So we're seeing older citizens increasingly able, increasingly capable, knowledgeable, wise, having something to offer. And so when I hear the messages that older people are getting that they should move away, make room for younger people, I think, what? What are we doing? Why are we not saying, we need you, and how can we re-envision a social world where older adults are the cavalry coming over the hill? Now, I say that's aspirational. That's because I talk to Linda Fried a lot, and we talk about imagining the future. What could it be? But imagine a world where the older citizens around the globe are the people who are the caretakers, who are watching out for social justice, for younger people, for societies and communities. Imagine that world. And it's a realistic vision of the future to say that we could get there. We know we can, because a lot of people are already doing a lot for their future contributions to the world. The panel, the way things are going to happen next is that I will introduce you to our three speakers who will each give their presentations, and then after that we'll reconvene and have a conversation with them, and then invite you into that conversation about reimagining the social world. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Bola AMAIKE from the University of Lagos in Nigeria. She is a professor of sociology and a social gerontologist, and her presentation is called Lifelong Learning Opportunities and Engagement of Aging Populations. Bola.
Good morning, everyone. Privileged to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I thank NAM. I thank AARP. I will be speaking on the title before us, Lifelong Learning Opportunities, Engagement of Aging Population. Of course, my name is Bola AMAIKE. I'm of the Department of Sociology, University of Lagos. This will be the outline of my presentation. I won't bore us by going through that. Generally, the right to lifelong learning and education is a fundamental human right. It does not change with age. Every person has a right to life. An older person, older adult, irrespective of their age, also have a right to live, not just to survive. In most society, all-inclusive society is the aspiration, not leaving anyone behind, according to the United Nations SDG. That therefore means all society must put in place systems that will promote all-inclusive society for all ages, including older adults. In Africa, we are very familiar with, and specifically in Nigeria, older people face a lot of challenges. They face age-based discrimination, prejudice, stereotypes, and these ultimately limit and obstruct and hinder them from getting access to education, lifelong learning, and opportunity that can improve them in the life course. Of course, there are several conventions. African Union also had a protocol trying to promote the rights of older persons. The question is African aging? I would say yes and no. Yes, to the extent that Africa is gradually getting to the point where we're beginning to experience demographic transition in terms of the proportion of the population that are aged 65 years and above or 80 years and above. Between 2017 and 2050, African aged 65 years and above in 2017 was 69. This is projected to be 226 by 2030. That tells us we have a lot of work to do. 200% increase is something we need to start looking at. Because when we also look at the 80 years and above, 6.2 million today as of 2017, by the time we get to 2050, this will have gone to 23 million people. And if I look at Nigeria specifically, 5% of Nigerian population is said to be 60 years and above. But 200 million people, 5% of that gives us 10 million people. We need to start thinking, what do we do to 10 million people, even though if the proportion is said to be small compared to the larger population. The implication of all of this is there are going to be profound effect on health, on well-being, on living condition, socioeconomic well-being of older person. And when we're talking about older person, it doesn't just affect the older person alone. It affects the family, the community, as well as the society. When older persons are not supported to live dignified life, have their autonomy and independence in society, we lose a lot. Because it's not all about challenges, it's also about opportunities, it's all about the prospect and the contribution they bring to the table as caregiver, as community leaders, and support people in the community. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with the impact of this on intergenerational support and solidarity in Africa? I support, and I made a case for strong filial piety. Africa is known to be very supportive, but then because of several things that happened in the course of our years, modernization, westernization, there's been an erosion of these cultural values. And over time, we have rural migration, rural urban migration, we have the exodus of our young people to modern society and to developed society, leaving older people behind in the village. And we say we shouldn't leave anyone behind. How do we ensure that we reinvent and we recreate the world that we need, where every person will be well taken care of? Abundance relationship between and among generations will go a long way, and we also should develop a way of ensuring that everyone has something to contribute. It may not be financial, and if you look at social exchange theory, everyone has something to offer. This basically could be said to be the definition of some of the concepts that governs the work I want to present to us. Lifelong learning has to do with continuing education. It does not stop. It's continuous. It may be formal, it may be informal, it may be non-formal. The essence of this is to sustain improved knowledge, skill, and knowledge information about the person and the skill that the individual needs throughout the life course. And ultimately, this will lead to personal fulfillment as an individual. You have a sense of accomplishment, a sense of worth, a sense of being able to do that which you want to do on your own. And when we look at engagement, active aging is a concept that comes close to engagement. How do we support other person to have opportunity to have good life, to have healthy life, and to be able to participate in day-to-day activity that concerns them, concerns their family, and concerns the community they live in? And most importantly, how do we ensure that we promote security and safety of other person in order to enhance the quality of life and their living standards? This is a concept that is very, very familiar with us, and what basically we try to speak to this is to see the determinant of active aging. If you look at the social component of that, you clearly see that health is very important, long-term care is critical, and the prevention strategy that are put in place will go a long way in promoting the well-being of other person. We've also looked at the behavioral determinant. We're looking at ability to encourage physical activity, exercise, nutrition, change in lifestyle that will ensure that other people can live longer and become active and be engaged in their community. If you also look at the physical factors and determinant, we're looking at the safety and the security of other person in terms of household welfare, living arrangement, and every other thing that they need within the community they live in, and the support system they have in place. Aging in place is a concept that we always talk about in gerontology. How do they want to live? They must be stakeholder. They must be determinant of that which we want to do for them. We don't decide for them. We don't prescribe to them. We must tell them, what do you want to do? And we make informed decisions based on that negotiation and the definition they have. Economic factor basically try to cover the income, the support system, the social protection that they have to take care of their daily needs. They must be able to get out of poverty situation that most other people have found themselves in. The safety net is very important, and Africa, basically, we need to do so much about social protection of other person as vulnerable members of the society. So this and some of the concepts I think we need to look at. I don't want to look into detail about that. What are the predictors? What are the drivers of active engagement? Self-rated living standard, very important. Most time, people think they can't do things they can do. We must be able to get to a point when we're able to talk them out of that. I'm a sociologist. I do a lot with other person, and I also have some NGOs that we deal with, other people trying to create the narrative, change the narrative, to say you can if you believe you can. And some of them over time have been told over and over again you can't do it. And they have accepted it and internalized that ageistic perspective and perception and attitude, and they seek themselves not being able to do that. The socioeconomic status is also a very major important indicator and predictors of those that can be engaged. If you're talking about Abraham Maslow, talking about the hierarchy of needs, if you are still struggling to meet your basic need, your physiological needs, you're not likely to think of getting engaged or getting involved in your community. You want to survive first and foremost. So social demographic indicators and factors are also very important in terms of gender. Africa is a patriarchal society. Women tend to have a lot of challenges. If you're a woman, you face double jeopardy, if not triple jeopardy in old age. Double jeopardy to the extent that you are old and you're a woman, and triple jeopardy because now you are old, you're a woman, you are aging. So these are issues that you have to deal with. Marital status also have been found to be very important in determining ability to get involved and engage in society. S status, of course, is very important. Subjective S status, some people are of the opinion they are sick because of the poor health facility that we have. You tend to see many people are just managing themselves, unable to take care of basic needs of their lives. The social mobility and the social support system that we have in terms of social capital has been found to be also very important. When the support system is there to promote and assist and help the older people to live and to be the best they can be, they tend to do better. And of course, for family care responsibility, in most cases, because of the middle generation career family that are basically working, the grandchildren tend to stay with the older parents, which tend to trap them with the caregiving responsibility. With that care responsibility that you have to deal with, it is pretty difficult for older persons to be able to take care of themselves or have a life of their own. So these are all challenges that older people tend to deal with. Residence, location, the living arrangement, these are all concepts that limit and hinder older person. In Africa, essentially, we're talking about Nigeria. Lifelong learning is mostly informal. And quite a few could be said to be formal in terms of coming to the university, coming to the regular school to get a skill or to get information, to get knowledge. But from all of these, there are critical characteristics that I can bring out, and I think from what I put across for us, social responsibility is very important. Whatever relationship or role you get involved with is about being responsible to the society, and this is very important. Lifelong opportunity, where are the opportunities? Like I mentioned earlier on, non-formal, they have formal education, quite a number. There was a woman in my university, she graduated first degree at the age of 77 years, and she said she was coming back for a master's degree, and she's going to do a PhD. That is a success story of a woman that wanted to live her life to the best because she's always wanted to do that. We also have community efforts that have been put in place for older persons to be able to get engaged in the community, vocational training, volunteer training, and getting committed in the community. Religious engagement is also found to be very, very fulfilling for older persons because at that time they tend to see themselves as people that want to leave something as legacy behind. In terms of social engagement, we have the Elder Forum in Nigeria, especially in Lagos, where the elders gather as opinion holders and city dwellers, and they get the community to see things from their own perspective, and they are very important in terms of political participation. What are the benefits? It cuts across 3 different levels: personal development, you also have social inclusion, you have economic benefit to the community, to the individuals, and of course, they're able to perform their civic role as citizens. Is there a connection, is there a nexus between lifelong learning and healthy longevity? Clearly, yes, there are positive implications in terms of the impact this will have, in terms of economic resources, psychosocial resources, as well as healthy lifestyle. Most people that have been involved in lifelong learning over the course of their life have been found to live a better life. They also have a sense of achievement and fulfillment in terms of what they're able to do for themselves ultimately. Are there barriers? Clearly, there are barriers. Like I mentioned now, ageism is a major barrier. You are too old to learn. You'll soon die. Why are you going to school? Why are you learning a new skill? Can you teach a dog a new skill or a new trick? These are issues that hinder and limit other people from getting to learn new skills or get improved along the line. How do we now promote in the life course? Awareness is important. We must adopt life course perspective, legislation in areas that we need to do that. And of course, the last one I would like to mention is the issue of flexible work schedule. It should not be an opportunity course. You don't have to leave work to go get your skill improved. You actually can, I think in the course of the week, there is this move to have 4 days work days, and you cannot have 3 days weekend. You can really get people that can do cash program over the weekend, and they can get better over time. And people are learning new skills to improve themselves, and whatever skill they've had in the former first of their life, they can change in the middle life and change to something they can retire into, and that will become a second career that some can fall back on. How do we maintain standard of living? A number of issues have been thrown up. Active engagement of other person will help to maintain the standard of living. It's been found that social activity has clearly told us that when you are active, engaged, you are likely to live longer, you're going to have better life satisfaction, you're going to have better quality of life. So engagement is important, and that must be based on their own ability, based on their own capacity, and based on their health as well. In terms of participation, other persons must be seen to be stakeholders in the community they live in, and their lives must be seen to matter as well. Then in terms of lifestyle, exercises, nutrition, change in lifestyle generally is very important. This is some of the things they are going to learn in the course of lifelong learning. And in terms of informal support system, Africa is very good when it comes to informal support system, but other people should not just be caregivers. They are not just caregivers, they are also recipients of care, and it's meant to be an exchange between and among generations. And most importantly, co-residence is an important concept that is very that's been found to have worked in Africa. Multi-generational family, and I think in Asia also is very important in the multi-generational family, where different generations can come together, and all of them are stakeholders. They are contributing the quota to the development of the family, the community, as well as the society. How do we now measure the indication of disruptive action? How do we do it? We must find a way of protecting older person, aging adults, from all form of age-based discrimination. There should be laws, affirmative action. In some countries, they will tell you if you are this age, you are entitled to this, and you cannot be discriminated based on age. It's in the Constitution of Nigeria, for instance, but the important thing is what is the implementational level. How do we implement it? How do we implement this? This is very important. How do we improve the standard of living of people? We do not have social security, and social support system is very, very weak from the informal sector. Intergenerational education is very important because this will bring about social inclusion and cohesion and solidarity, because if you see other person as people that are part of the society, you'll see what you can do to contribute towards their well-being. Collaborative research, we've been talking about that. We're talking about multi-generational research. We're talking about intergenerational research. We're talking about multidisciplinary research, trying to look at aging from different perspectives. And we all come together to see how do we push the narrative further and bring about innovative technology and bring about functioning of other persons in a way that they can contribute to the society. Age-friendly policies and programs will also help a great deal in promoting the inclusion and changing the narrative that we have currently. And lastly, intergenerational solidarity. We are together in it. This is a family thing. One of us is all of us. And what happened to one happened to all of us. And like in the past, people tend to pray, I want to live old, because then you see it as a blessing from God. But today, that is beginning to be eroded because of the value system that is changing over time. We can go back to that point where we see elders as elders indeed, because they are valuable and they are contributing their quota to the society. These are some of the grounding principles that should govern the way we look at lifelong learning. It must be non-discriminatory, equality must be there, it must be accessible, it must be affordable and available to the people that require it. It must also be acceptable to them, and we must put in a mechanism to account, to bring about accountability, feedbacks, and the complaints can be taken in, and we can bring about remedy. So this is a story of a woman that had lifelong learning. She was able to learn a new skill in old age, and that brought about a voice for her. She was able to speak, she was able to have a voice. She felt she got empowered, her life chances improved, and ultimately her quality of life and outcomes were better off. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Bola, and I love the images. She's beautiful. Our next speaker is QUYEN TRAN, who is the Regional Director of HelpAge International in Chiang Mai, Thailand. He's going to talk to us about older people's associations in Vietnam, and the title of his talk is Harnessing Social Networks and Intergenerational Support to Empower Active Lifestyles Across the Life Course. Thank you, QUYEN.
That's working. Okay. Okay, yes, so my presentation will be on... Okay. With this one. Nope, okay. So my presentation will be on how we have been working with our local partners in the region to promote intergenerational approach in promoting healthy and active aging in Asia, especially in resource-limited countries and communities. So, but before I start, I would like to read a quote from Mother Teresa, and here's the quote. Being unwanted, unloved, uncared, forgotten by everyone, I think that is a much greater hunger, a much greater poverty than a person who has nothing to eat. This is a very, very large and growing problem in Asia. And before, we thought it was a problem in the urban area. We thought this was a problem in a developed country, but now we're seeing it even a bigger problem in rural Asia, where 50 to 60% of the population in the rural area are older people. So yes, Asia has the largest and the fastest aging population in the world. Around 70% of all older people in the world live in Asia. Okay? And however, many of the countries in Asia still have very, very limited resources. And so how are they going to respond to rapid aging when the resource is so limited? This is a very background of HelpAge work in the region. Before, we've worked in Asia for the last 30 plus years, and our approach in the first phase of our work in Asia was basically we work with our local partner, and depending on the donor, we would then establish CBO, community-based organization. Sometimes we call it Older People Association. And if the donor said, oh, we're interested in rights and entitlement, we would do CBOs and rights and entitlement. If the donor said, oh, we are interested in climate change, we have CBOs on climate change. And so we were very proud of our comprehensive project in the region. However, we were having this lingering question. Were we meeting the need of the donor, or are we needing the people of the people? What happened when the project ends, when the funding ends, and we say goodbye? What happened? Are there lasting benefits? Will it continue? And the third one was that we had such great and wonderful model. Why aren't we seeing any local buy-in? Why? And so that was the question. And so in 2006, we did an evaluation of our intervention in the region, especially in Vietnam, and we found that most of our intervention were very, very single focus, vertical, 1 or 2 area mostly focused on the need of the donor, not the need of the people. Because of that, there was very weak in local ownership, and the sustainability was very, very low. Okay, and because of that, we found that our intervention was very, very expensive with relating to the impact, and we had no exit strategy. Our exit strategy is when the project ends, we end, like that, and we only pilot. We always said we pilot, we innovate pilot, but we never managed to replicate anything like that. And also we did not have any customer in the last 10, 20 years, no customer, no replication. So that's the reality of it. But from the evaluation, we had 3 key recommendations. It was quite interesting. Whatever we do, whatever model we develop, we need to have a model that has strong buy-in, that meets the need of the people first, but that is not enough. We need to also bring it up to what the people want, but still not enough, and the people demand. So the level need, want, and demand. Okay? The third one was that it must be durable. It must show that how, after the project funding ends, it can continue. And the third one is that it must be scalable. We are not there to develop one fancy model where it's so expensive that nobody can replicate. Our goal is to replicate something that the country can use and need, but they can replicate themselves. And so we developed this initiative called the Intergenerational Self-Help Club Development Model. It's a development initiative that provides the control of the development process, resources, and decision-making authority directly to the community group. Before we said, oh, we should do this, we should do that. Now we said, the community should do this, the community should do that. The underlying assumption is that the intergenerational model are that the community is the best to judge at how their life can be improved, and if provided with adequate training, information, opportunity, and resources, they can organize themselves to provide for the intermediate need and also the long-term need. Moreover, the model are motivated by the trust in people, and hence it advocates people full responsibility as a powerful force for development, and by treating people as an asset and a partner in the development process. And so what is so unique about this model? So the first one you see here is the monthly social and cultural activity. It includes everyone, young or old. It targets the entire community, not just those that are disadvantaged. It promotes by promoting stronger local ownership, mutual support, and able to tap available local resources and greater and lasting impact. So this is the organogram. A typical village in Vietnam is 1,000 people. And so the community set their own system, and each village is divided by a neighborhood, and each neighborhood has their own representative. It helps community to help themselves. One thing is that it's financially sustainable. In the past, we were focusing on activity at the bottom here, and when we have money, the activity runs well. But when the project ends, all the activity dies. So what we did was we focused on the blue part there, helping the community to have their own self-generated income from the interest from the revolving fund to membership fee, local fundraising, and even small social enterprise. One thing that's really innovative is number one. Before, we had microcredit and saving, like many of us. However, the interest and the principle goes back to the partner, not to the community. This one goes back to the community, so they can invest in the community. And so by doing that, the club are much more responsive to the need of the community, and it's financially sustainable and able to generate its own income when the project ends. Okay? So the model is based on the people know, the people decide, the people do, the people monitor, and the people manage. Okay? And it's affordable. This is very important. So if the government of Vietnam just invests 0.02% of its GDP, not 1%, 0.02% of the GDP for 10 years, there'll be enough money to establish 100,000 groups. So one in every single village in the country. Okay? The next one is it's multifunctional. What do we mean by multifunctional? So the one here is the old phone, has only 1 or 2 apps. This was our old project. This is why nobody wants it. Nobody. The demand was very low. So we moved it to this one, the multifunctional, the smartphone, where now a woman needs it, a man needs it, a young person needs it, an older person needs it, a poor person needs it, and also as a wealthy one. And so what does it mean by being multifunctional? So the first one is social and cultural. This is by far the most popular. There's singing, there's dancing, there's magic show, there's entertainment, making people fun and alive. So there's cultural performance, home visits, people that are having weddings, funerals, or you're sick, we visit you. Exchange visit, making it fun. This is by far the most popular. The second one is income security, having credit, having access to information, having volunteer. We have economic volunteer. So economic, for example, this lady is very good at growing banana. That lady doesn't know how, so she said, I will be a volunteer. I will sponsor you. I will train you. I will teach you to become a great banana grower. Like that. Health is one of our big components. The first one is physical exercise. Every morning when you go to this club, they will have exercise 5 o'clock in the morning. It could be Tai Chi. It could be aerobic. It could be line dancing, like that. At nighttime, they will have sport, volleyball, football, like that. Followed by awareness, health awareness, training materials so that they can train themselves. Thirdly, health monitoring, health screening and health checkup. And then health insurance and health checkup, making sure that every person is screened on a monthly basis. You can see these like that. Okay? Home care. Home care is also one of a big component. Currently now, the Intergenerational Self-Help Club is the largest by far care provider in the country. If this is the old data, the current data is they have 20,000 home care volunteers taking care of about 10,000 clients. Self-help. Every month, the group assess what is needed in the village and does community development activity, providing labor, technical support in cash or in kind. Lifelong learning. Every month they organize a discussion and learning so the old can teach the young can teach the old. Okay? And then number 7 one is the rights entitlement, ensuring that the people in the community knows what their rights are and having access to legal service and also dialogue with the local authority to ensure that the person has the rights entitlement from land rights to birth certificate and so and so. The last one is resource mobilization. The need is great in the community while the resource is very limited. However, the resources in the community, either in labor, in kind, or in cash, and how to motivate, how to encourage people to give more within the community. Okay? So what are the evidence? And these are the evidence. This is from one project. We were funded by QUYEN with $758,000, and we were able to work in 96 villages. A cost of $7,800 per village. That's the total cost. My salary, London salary, the whole come down, like that. And you can see, about 95% of the member practice physical exercise every day. Almost 95% have health insurance, like that, and so and so. And even, for example, on the other slide there is that for poverty reduction, almost 42% increase in income. Like that. We have many, many data. The number is quite large. We surveyed 13,600 people, and we asked them, since joining club, said 88.6% said we are healthier. 97% said we are wealthier. And 92 or 93% said they are happier, more confident, more empowered, more solidarity within the community. Like that. And so this sounds great. But what are the evidence? What are the evidence? If it's great, then there will be replication. As you can see, we started in 2006 with 60, and it's grown very fast. By the end of 2018, the government assessed that there were 2,275 clubs, of which 1,889 meet the minimum standard of 8 criteria. The other 386 are in the earlier stage, and we'll probably get there in a year or so, like that. It took us 10 years. It took us 10 years from piloting the model until, on the red there, called Decision 1533. This is approved by the Prime Minister. It's a national plan to replicate this model. This is the very first decision ever that relates to a NGO development model to be replicated throughout the country. And you can see that in Vietnam, there are 63 provinces, right? As of the end of 2018, 55 out of 63 already have this model. Okay. In addition to that, we also have replicated and shared this model. And every year we conduct training not for Vietnam, but for the region. The first one is 2015, 2016, 2017, and then 2018. The next one will be conducted next week in Hanoi, like that. We also have now funding to replicate this model, to adapt and to adopt the model in Bangladesh, in Cambodia, and also in Indonesia. Our next target would be for Thailand and then for the Philippines. Okay? As you said, resources limited, the demand is huge. The demand is very large. So we looked around and we found the supermarket model. This is called the supermarket model. So we are there, we're bringing people to the supermarket. And so how does it look like? For example, we have 50 topics on social and cultural, 300 topics on livelihood, resource mobilization, health, care. And so the villagers or the club has empty cart. When they go through our process, they will have their own carts. And each community will select which activity they want, which product they want at the cost they can afford, and they bring home. So that is the model. So what are the strengths of this model? It alleviates the over-reliance on the central government as the main and the only service provider. Now we partner with them, and we found it to be a win-win situation. It improves accountability of service and promotes equitable and inclusive development. It's effective in targeting people that are excluded, the bedbound, the housebound, the people that are the very, very, very poor. And it promotes local ownership, allowing community to manage and control its own local resources directly, like that. Okay. And that was my presentation, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You know, I was writing notes, yes, but what about scalability? And it was like, well, here you go. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Professor Nancy MORROW-HOWELL. She's on the faculty in the School of Social Work at Washington University, where she is a distinguished professor and also director of the Harvey Friedman Center on Aging. She's a leader in research on productive aging and volunteerism. My pleasure to welcome Professor Howell.
Thank you so much, and it's such an honor to be with such brilliant people and wonderful programs on this panel. I'm a gerontological social worker, and I was excited that our profession, through the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare, developed a grand challenge scheme, and they selected 12 grand challenges. And my colleagues and I, who you can see there, were able to get increasing productive engagement among the 12 grand challenges for our social work profession. I'm so excited about that because this was for social work, right? So our grand challenges are hunger and homelessness and decarceration. So this was the only one specifically focused on older adults, and it was focused on solution. You know, it wasn't focused on age's problem. So we're excited about that, and I'm going to tell you in my time here a bit about our conceptual argument and some of the empirical support that people have generated. Oh, I got to do my own slides. I forgot. Okay, so of course we begin our argument with Bob Butler, who coined the phrase productive aging in the early 1980s. Obviously a founding geriatrician and first director of NIA. Dr. Butler said we have to draw attention away from dependency towards contribution, and that's the fundamental view of our productive aging argument, that we have to move away from age drain to age as asset. And we've heard about the growing capacity across the globe of older adults, and Laura mentioned we know there's a developmental desire to be generative and to give back in meaningful ways. So we can see this growing capacity as part of the solution to the press that's created of an aging population, as well as to the increasing inequality across the life course. We look at productive aging. We try to avoid the sort of the existential argument about productive aging as a concept. We focus on activities. We focus on an activity by an older person that contributes to the productions of goods or service, whether paid or not, paid and unpaid work. So we focus on three mainstream activities that are paid and unpaid work: employment, formal caregiving, and we can include informal caregiving there, and, employment, volunteering, and caregiving. Many have proposed that if we can maximize the engagement of older adults in these activities, we can achieve these outcomes. Notice that the outcomes are very multi-level. This isn't just about the individual. We have the most evidence at the individual level. That's easier to document, effects of working and volunteering and caregiving on the individual doing those behaviors. In general, we document that productive or meaningful engagement is good for people. We know it's bad for people when choice is not involved in the employment sector, conditions aren't involved in the employment sector, or caregiving is overwhelming. So we have to be very careful about the effects on individuals, but we all know that engagement in important roles is important in some ways for all of us, and it spills over to family, benefits to community, benefits to society. Some of these are theoretical. We could probably pull a little bit of evidence on each one of those to support these statements. And one of my colleagues said, the biggest outcome of all could be that last one at the societal level, that if we can increase, function through these productive engagements, there'll be less demand due to the postponement of disability. A very high outcome, but one that we believe we could achieve. Our conceptual framework has become more environmental over time. And I think I'm on this panel because the focus is on environment. We do not focus on the individual capacity. We said that has been growing, and we are leaving it on the table by not maximizing the institutional capacity to engage it. So we look mainly at environments. As a social worker, we look at policy and program environments to create organizational or institutional capacity to engage the older adult. So our strategies are about environmental interventions. And of course, all the age-friendly environment type of activities relate to this engagement as well. So the strategies to promote productive engagement in our mind is to develop programs, policies, and environments to maximize engagement. So we want to capture the current capacity, and especially as it grows over time, but we want to facilitate it in a way that maximizes positive outcomes. We can't be naive that it's all good, that everybody can and wants to work longer, that everybody's jumping up and down to be a caregiver. So we have to facilitate the engagement if we're going to get the benefit for the individual, the family, the community, and society in ways that maximize the positive outcomes. So I'm going to look quickly at these different activities to talk about what people are thinking. Some of this, again, is theoretical, that we could probably pull evidence on all of these. But let's look at volunteering. How can we increase the number of older adults that are volunteering and the experience that they have? We look towards organizational capacity. We call it institutional capacity. Outreach training, ongoing supervisory and peer-led learning, rewards and recognition. What older volunteers report they want is flexibility and choice. What we know makes people stay in those roles is flexibility and inclusive work environments where they are physically and psychologically included. We have quite a bit of work on volunteering and what it takes, at least from the report of the volunteers, for them to be satisfied in those roles. And we have some evidence that if you can attain those attributes, people stay in those roles longer. Employment. A lot of focus on older adults in employment roles, and here is what we know people say they want: inclusive age-neutral hiring and training practices, again, flexible and part-time arrangements, facilitating involvement in non-paid work. people right now are sort of penalized, right, for entering caregiving roles and leaving formal paid roles, and we are not doing so well in this country. Maybe we can hear examples in other countries where the facilitation of working in caregiving is made to be more easy. We know that if we could get people volunteering before they leave the workforce, that they will more likely continue after they leave their job, so that would be a way to facilitate the transition of people between productive roles. Education, my colleague talked about lifelong education. We believe that we need to increase age diversity at colleges and universities. We need to create more certificate and job training programs. I'm so fascinated by what our colleagues in Japan are doing. And you may or may not know that there is a new global network, the Age-Friendly University Global Network, where we're thinking about strategies to engage people of all ages in our educational system. Part of this solution is going to be age integration of our institutions, right? We know that age segregation exists in most of our organizations, and in order to enable education, working, leisure across the life course, we need to think about increasing age diversity. I was asked to talk a minute about Experience Corps. Dr. Linda Fried started this wonderful program with Mark Friedman in the mid-90s, I would say. When was your first program? 96. It has been a model program. It's now run by ARP, and so we could get the most up-to-date information on the program. My information is a little bit old because we conducted this research a while ago, but as you might know, Experience Corps solicits the participation of older adults, 50 plus, reaches to them specifically, trains them, puts them in schools, elementary schools mainly, kindergarten through third grade, to assist teachers and to help students who are struggling. The focus has been on reading, excuse me, and the Baltimore with Johns Hopkins has done some real intensive look at the outcomes of Experience Corps. We did some study more generally across the country. There's about 20 cities that have Experience Corps programs, about 2,000 volunteers. So we, in our research, we were able to accomplish an experimental design in the schools. So we were able to because there's more kids needing the program than there was ability to provide the program, we were able to randomize kids into the program and document that, in fact, they did read better. Very interested in the outcomes to the older volunteers. We were able to, Baltimore has an experimental design they can tell you about. Linda can tell you about. We accomplished an experimental design where we took new volunteers to the program and followed them for 2 years using some of the same measures that the HRS used. So we had the time frame of the HRS, the measures of the HRS. We used a propensity matching kind of methodology to document that the volunteers did have a reduction in functional limitations and depression and a marginally significant improvement in self-rated health. If you talk to the volunteers, you will get really, amazingly high endorsement of the positive effects on their life. If you talk to teachers and administrators, endorsing, and if you talk to family members, endorsing the positive effects. So it's a model program of what we could do to capture the capacity of older adults and produce outcomes at multiple levels. The criticisms of this productive engagement are real, and we need to be aware of them. So we put forth these principles that I think we could all agree on, that as we think about older adults working, volunteer caregiving, we need to strive for choice to be involved, for intergenerational conflict to be reduced, for it to be about opportunity, and to be about inclusion. So those are principles that we look to in our programs and policies for productive engagement. But a last word of caution. We know that individuals who have been marginalized across the life course are going to be further marginalized when we're thinking about working longer and increasing volunteerism and looking towards caregiving for doing more in the face of our changing demographics. it's going to be, it will not be good if we are not thinking about life course, cumulative disadvantage, multiple jeopardy, and develop our programs and policies to, again, be inclusive and to provide choice and opportunity. One of the biggest challenges to this vision, of course, is ageism and age segregation. I'm so glad that we're talking about it here today. So when we think about programs and policies, we also have to think about attitude shifts in our whole society for us to achieve this vision. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Because I get to have a microphone up here, I can ask a couple questions first, and then we'll let you. I was so impressed with all of the examples of these great things that are happening. And I also began to wonder why it isn't just happening everywhere. So why aren't, 1,000 flowers blooming or whatever? Do we have a problem at all? If when you hear about these great things that are happening formally, informally, through organizations, the numbers that I hear in the United States is about 24% of older people are volunteering in their communities. So there's a lot of room for growth in that number. And I wanted to hear from all the panel members what they think about that. Like, how common is this? How big is it? Are there still barriers that we're facing? Do we need to do more? Or do you think this is just the beginning and we'll just naturally see older people assume the kinds of roles that you all are talking about?
Okay, so there's two questions. The first question is basically, I'll take the second question first, is volunteering. So in the intergenerational club, in a typical village, we will have about 50 volunteers. Mm-hmm. And so 20% is reasonable, 25% is reasonable, and we can even increase it if we have much more program, and as the club develop, it will get more and more volunteer. So if there's a purpose, there's an opportunity, a lot of older people will volunteer. Mm-hmm. The second one is, are we facing challenge in replicating? And we said yes. Because a lot of the donors are very traditional donors. They're very vertical. I am a donor and ownership in one thing only. I don't care about all the other one. And so, but even though when we talk to them about, being multifunctional, it's more holistic, mm-hmm. and will make your project more stronger, more resilient, but still they're not interested. And so we have problems with donors, but the growing number of donors that understand the importance of being multifunctional, meeting the need of the people as well as their own need, mm-hmm. is something that's growing, but it's still very slow, mm-hmm. slow process.
Thank you.
There's lots of aspects we could go. We do know that volunteering is so culturally determined. It would be so interesting to hear of different cultures and how volunteer rates differ. And it has a lot to do with strengths of nonprofit sectors. In this country, we rely on volunteers in our nonprofit sector, where in some countries where there's a stronger public and nonprofit supported, they don't need volunteers. We need volunteers. Older adults' rate does drop in volunteering, and it's not because they can't drive and they're not healthy. It's not for all those reasons. The major reason is because we're separated from the organizations that encourage volunteering here. Workplaces, we all volunteer for our kids' school, right? And when your kids are out of school, you don't volunteer. So it's our separation from mainstream that has some to do with why older people aren't volunteering as much. We do think we can increase those numbers through very good programming. Informal volunteering and neighboring, we need to get our hands and think that's just as valuable. But I do think that facilitating volunteers for folks that have been excluded from that enterprise is important in this country. It's very related to education and income and knowledge about where to volunteer. So to include people who do not have those resources through better information, more specific asking, some offset of financial costs that are incurred, maybe stipends, would bring volunteering rates up in communities that have been excluded. And we do know that benefit to those volunteers is we can document that it's even greater moving into a formal role where there's that recognition and some support.
Okay, thank you. I also support the argument that have been pushed forth. I think it's possible for older people to get more involved, but the issue is to most of these older people really don't know to what extent they can get involved. They don't know what they can do, at least for Africa and Nigeria. You find that they are willing to help, but they don't know to who they can turn to. And it's like, how do I help? Except at the informal level, at the family level, at the maybe religious level, faith-based organization where they are allowed, because you are known. You don't want to get to a place you don't know and you say, oh, I want to volunteer. I say, where are you coming from? Because of lack of database, you don't know who is coming to the fore. So that is there. I think we can still do more at that point. In terms of barriers, clearly there are barriers. Like I mentioned earlier on, most of the barriers are socio-cultural in nature because people want to do, but there are constraints within the system that will hinder them from getting involved. And if those barriers are not removed, either by legislation, by public awareness, by creating awareness among even the older person themselves, that they have something to offer, it may be difficult to be able to come and overcome some of those barriers.
And for informal volunteering, teaching someone to grow bananas, and is there a way to measure that? Do we have metrics where we can really see what's happening and the extent of it?
So for our economic volunteer, we have a big program. It's called Economic Volunteer, and they will sponsor with a contract to sponsor. I will be sponsoring you to raise chicken or something like that. And the contract is for a year contract. Okay. And then we also have what you call membership profile, where we measure her income on a yearly basis. Okay. You see the progress on income as well as her confidence. We measure also her confidence in raising chicken. So those kind of stuff that we have. And also we would also link with the local authority to give a certificate to the volunteer. So we recognize you have been volunteering, sponsoring 3 poor households and lifting them out of poverty or something like that. So with those kind of indicators, we also collect.
Thank you. I also, go ahead.
Okay, I also feel like in Nigeria we have what we call apprenticeship, that whereby people learn from masters. After a period of year, maybe 4 years, you set up the person that have learned under you. That person becomes a servant under you, something like that, and becomes a master. After the person is done, you set the person up in the business, because you cannot say, I have given you, in code they call it freedom, like a level of independence, that you can start your own business. And you also monitor and mentor that individual until that person get established. Then you can say you have actually achieved your purpose. So there are ways of measuring that. The person that comes, he couldn't do anything. Over a period of time, you start giving the person skill, he imitates you, learn from you, and you go to places, you go with this person, you see the way you operate these things, and over time that person is able to stand on his own, on her own, and able to go on from there. And most time we have all of those skills that are generational. That is, you learn this skill from people that have been practicing this skill over a period of time. Let me give a very typical example of medical practices. There are practices that are not orthodox because of African culture. We believe in the efficacy of herbs and plants, and there are people that have skill in this area. Of course, there are people that learn from them. When they learn from this individual, they can go learn and replicate that in terms of bringing technology to it, and in the process of time, you now have some of those apps being converted into modern taps, modern tablets, modern solution that people can now use today. But because they learned from older person, they were using concussion, as we call them, now they can now modernize and bring new technology into it. So this has been there over time, and people are beginning to embrace that aspect of it.
Thank you. Thank you. We can take questions from the group. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Gene Axis with AARP. Thank you so much for your great presentation. I had a 2-part question. We've been doing some work with the World Economic Forum and OECD. It's a major initiative called Living, Learning, Earning Longer, with the idea that really working with major corporations to think about and reimagine the future workforce, particularly as it relates to multi-generational workforce, and really retaining and the value of older workers in that process. And learning is a key aspect of that work. And I was really struck by the conversation today about really engaging older adults, particularly around lifelong learning. And I am trying to reconcile and would love your thoughts on the role of affordability in this conversation, as well as what policies could we, you would recommend that we think about to really ensure that as we support individuals who are living longer, who either want to work or need to work, and the ability to reskill or upskill, that no one is being left behind. So going back to our conversation yesterday around equity, to ensure that there is no one being left behind. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for that work. It's so important. I think all of us are thinking about lifelong education. I get a little, sometimes I think when we think lifelong learning, sometimes we do think of it as a real discretionary, as a real more leisure entertainment, keeping cognitive stimulated but not contributing to personal development for work. So we have to do both. So what programs, what educational programs do we need? That's why I'm so interested in the work in Japan, working backwards from here's some jobs that this community needs. How can we get older workers into those jobs? I've been discouraged a bit because we're working with our university, which is a Research One private university. Much more progress is being made in this country in community colleges and public universities, where tuition and age segregate, where tuition isn't as high and age segregation isn't as ingrained. But our career services people say, you know, we do what the job market demands. And when they need people, they'll hire our older students and our older workers. But until that time, you're going to be swimming upstream, because they come in and say, here's what we need, and we'll pick the best person that we need. And some of that works against our people that are coming back later in life. So I think it's a really important question to work with organizations. I think we could demonstrate the value of age-diverse workplaces. I know some of you, and I know Lisa Berkman, they've looked at the value of an age-diverse workforce for a specific company. So if we could demonstrate the value of an age-diverse workforce. You know, we said, well, older workers are more loyal and they're more dependable and they're more satisfied. Well, so, you know, employers say good, but we also need that job done, and we need it done well, and the digital divide is big. So it's how to say what is the value of the older worker in the workforce, I think is an important empirical question that we could answer.
Can I add another question on top of that? Is there age segregation within volunteerism? And is that a problem we should address, where we stop saying older people need to come in as volunteers to get mixed age teams?
Yeah, there is. I mean, just think of AmeriCorps. You know, gazillion % older. I know in the Serve America Act, and Erwin could tell us about this, was going to be, you know, changed to say you have to put 10% of your money towards older people in AmeriCorps. And I don't know if we've succeeded, but Erwin could certainly teach us about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my response to lifelong learning and how the government or society is promoting it. In China, in Thailand, and many other countries in the region now, in Asia, we have now older people's school. Older people's school. In Thailand, there are 3,000 older people's school. And this is basically because of demand for older people. And how does the government facilitate this one? They provide enabling environment. They provide free venue. So schools at nighttime, they open up for older people and link with the older people club. And the older people club finds the volunteer to provide the instruction in Japanese, learning dancing, learning a new skill. And then older people, even near old, will come and attend. And this has been very, very successful. And the cost is very limited. It's just enabling environment.
Thank you. Okay. Paula.
No. Let me just speak to the issue of affordability. Like in my university, we have 2 programs for continuing education. We call it DLI, Distant Learning Institute. That is, you can learn from the comfort of your room. It's a matter of getting modules and having radio program that you can listen to, and they have all this program bound and people can buy, and most time it's really very affordable. Then there's another level of a national university, we call it National Open University. It is an open university that is open to everybody. It's open access. You have most of those information online, and you can get access to them. Of course, you're like, oh, in Nigeria, yes, we have a bit of all of this. Some of them are on national radio, which everybody has radio. You can have access to radio. And for those that can afford to buy the manual, you can listen. You can even come to the university library and have access to those documents. And they also sell group or study group that you have in different localities and community at the LG, which is like county in the US. You also can learn at those levels, and there are support group people have to increase and improve their skills, their knowledge, the information. There are NGOs, there are faith-based organizations that are doing a lot to improve, to empower, and to make sure that people have the skill. The whole essence of that is to empower the individual to be able to take care of himself or herself, and then be able to take care of others, because we're talking about a multiplier effect. If one person is empowered, is able to take care of 2, 3, 4 people, and the multiplier effect goes round and round, and every other person can stand strong and be able to take care of the other person. So it's not that expensive. And of course, bearing in mind that Africa is very supportive, you get somebody that will be there to buy something for you, to assist you, provided you are trying to improve yourself. You've been coming to beg like, oh, I need money every month, and now I have a skill I want to learn, I want to be better off. Even in Lagos State where I'm working, you find that we also have skill acquisition, and it's free. Free acquisition anywhere you want to, anything you want to learn, provided it's part of what is there, you can learn, and when you are done, they will give you soft loan. There's the Bank of Industry that will give you access to those loans, and they will monitor over a period of time. And these are all systems that have been put in place to support the downtrodden and to assist the poorest of the poor, to empower them and be able to stand on their own.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Roger Chung from Chinese University of Hong Kong. Thank you very much for the great talk, and I'm very impressed with all the works that you guys are doing. So my question is more, I'm not sure if I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I'm wondering, because I was tasked to summarize the literature on aging, and I couldn't help but to notice that there are many different ideas and concepts and frameworks about aging. So, productive aging, active aging, successful aging, healthy aging, and they overlap, and people are critiquing one another, so I have this interesting conversation with my mom the other day. So she was asking me, oh, so you're working on healthy aging, so what were you guys talking about? And I was like telling her, well, active aging and productive aging, and she was like, wow, that sounds awfully harsh. Does it mean that I have to be very active and productive in order to live a dignified life? Does my life has no value if I'm not being actively contributing to the society? Can I just enjoy my life and aging healthily or even happily? So I think my question is this: when you guys are looking at at your programs, how do you decide on which framework, which conceptual framework to use for your aging program? And would you agree? Some of the critics would say, would you agree that have these frameworks amplified a little bit too much on the instrumental and economic roles and sides of aging? Thank you.
Our mothers would have liked one another. My mother once sent me a cartoon that had somebody laying on a bed saying, I'd be happy to embrace successful aging if only I could lift my arms. But
Thank you.
The response to the question to the panel.
Yeah, well, my deceased husband used to say, I hope nobody listens to you. And of course, the concept of productive aging, in fact, translating that into Chinese was very interesting, because there's images of productive, working in a factory, and productive being meaningfully engaged. So that's why I try not to use that word. We talk about older adults in these roles, as workers, as volunteers, as caregivers, to get away from that big argument, because certainly people have that reaction. I think that with the big models that we use, we have our own framework where we try to talk about factors associated with being involved in the roles and outcomes of that roles. But I think it's more those mid-level frameworks that are more useful, although you put up the WHO, the social determinants and active aging, is one that I think we can all ascribe to. But I don't have the answer. I'll hear if these people do.
Okay, I'd rather move away from what we want to what the older people want themselves, providing them with the option to decide, I want to be a volunteer or I want to receive volunteer. Like that, instead of saying, we decide for you. And so the model here is very successful because we empower them to decide for themselves what you want and what you need.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I just want to join them to say that in as much as the framework is there, it's meant to be a guide. We're not boxing everybody into a framework and say you must fit into this. You define, and that's why it's subjective, it's self-rated. How do you want to live? What is your definition of well-being? I like to wake up at this time. That is your own definition. It is allowed. It's not going to be objective to say everybody must fit into these indicators. It's just to see a framework to guide, to say, are we measuring up? Are we exceeding? Are we falling below? But the pressure should not be on another person to meet our aspiration. There's a work I did, and I called it Other Person's Expectation of Care, the care we want. That was like, I was trying to give a voice to the elderly person to say the care we want, and basically they were of the opinion that this is the way they want to be treated. This is the kind of care they want. Most time we tend to see that they want material care, whereas they may want emotional support. Sometimes we think they want instrumental care, and they may want totally different care. So it's all about negotiating with the elderly to get to a point where you meet them at the point they want to be met with, and you'll be able to say, these are the things you need, these are the things we think you should need. And it's all about negotiation. It's a choice they have to make. They must make that decision, and they must be empowered to make the informed decision as to what is good for them based on what you know as a professional. Even when you think they're making the wrong choices, you don't force it down their throat. You must educate them to say, this is not good enough. You better have to go this way, and you provide the reason why they should go that way. They say, oh, I never saw it from that perspective. Yes, it's not something we decided to do, not what they told me to do. And that is actually the way to change the narrative. They are not supposed to be on the other side. They are supposed to be actively involved in that decision that we make for them. So it's more than just economic role, it's more than instrumental role. It's about what they want and how they think they should be assisted to do what they do. Lastly, I'll mention the issue of ADL. Activities of daily living is very important in terms of defining how functional an individual is. A number of people, you'll be able to look at their level of functioning. You say, oh, this person is frail, this person is active, he can live independent, and otherwise. These are all things that has to do with some measures that we put in place in terms of indicators of well-being or physical activities. Thank you.
Let's have 2 more questions and then have lunch. Does that sound good? Yes.
This is Sarah Locke from AARP, and I want to follow up on Laura's question about barriers and expand a little bit on Nancy's point about Experience Corps. In visiting with the Baltimore Experience Corps program, the volunteers there were challenged at the end of the stipend of AmeriCorps to continue, because presenting as adults in the inner city school meant that they felt obligated to help pay for items that they would bring into the students, or facilitate what was happening in the programs that the teachers were working on. And they couldn't afford to pay for the bus fare to get to the school. So just very concretely talking about challenges of volunteering in low-resourced communities and the expectations there. And just to ask what your thoughts about this were, the point about choice, that in the community for the Experience Corps volunteers, men were shown to have expanded hippocampus as a result of their volunteering. They actually benefited more than women did, but it was not the choice of males in the community, at least in Baltimore at the time, to volunteer. And so I would like to hear your reactions to those observations.
You can answer too, Laura.
No, I have no answers. I think we need to pay volunteers. I will say that.
But we did find with the stipends that allowed Experience Corps volunteers to participate, they did it. They benefited, they enjoyed it, it had all the positive outcomes. But when we go to programs that don't have stipends, who stays longer, or in non-stipended roles? Because their participation was so tied to stipends, they couldn't do it a long time if it was tied to a stipend. So we have this problem. How can we offset the costs involved is a big one. In most programs, I don't know anymore because this is an old data collection. Most programs don't even offset the cost of gas or you got to pick up breakfast on the way. So this is a big challenge. I do not have the answer.
Right. No, I think John and Jack Rowe and Linda have written about this too. That we need to stipend people for volunteers, and money matters for two reasons. One is getting on the bus, so you don't lose money by volunteering, and the other is that we live in a society where there's a lot of symbolism to being paid, and so recognizing what somebody's contributing in some modest way can go a very long way. One more question, I said, yes.
Okay, I'm not going to hold for a long time. I'm Jian Su from AARP, and so in productive aging world, what do you think is the best way to measure older people's contribution to the economy and society? Here at AARP, we have a program, the study called the longevity economy, and try to measure the 50-pluses economic contribution. And also we have a valuing the invaluable, try to measure the value of family caregivers, their time. So what do you think is the best way to bring this all up and then measure?
Yeah, Lola, you can do this.
Okay, for Asia, it's quite difficult, and it varies greatly from urban to rural area. And in rural area, older people tend to have much more responsibility in the fabric because you have this issue where all the young adults have left the village. So all the running, the social, the cultural, the running of the community are basically on the hand of older people, from delivery of mails to communication to fixing the road to various things. So to measure that would be very difficult. And then in the urban area, that you have even a more complex environment. So measuring is very, very difficult, and the scale of it will be very difficult. And we have attempted to do a number of surveys before, but still getting the right data is still very, very complicated, very difficult.
Okay. I think to be able to do justice to that, we have to look at the specific situation and the environment within which that is happening. Not everything will be boils down to the currency in terms of financial or the economic indicators. There are some, for instance, the caregiving that has been given, you can say this 2 hours, this person has been able to work, how much would that be? He has not worked, so it's an opportunity cost. That 2 hours will have been $10. Now you can say that $10 has been used to take care of grandchildren. Though you cannot say this is what you will have paid, because most of this thing can be said to be informal, it's not paid for, it's not paid. So, but they do it nevertheless. They spend 2 hours, they spend 4 hours, they spend all of this hour. You can estimate and to a greater extent and see the cost of what that person will have done with what will otherwise be. So it's not a straightforward thing, and I think every society, every community would define the parameters and the values that have been added by what the other person had contributed. For instance, there are no grandparents that are doing school runs. We call school run in terms of pick up and drop off, because the parent generation are working. They leave home very early, 5 a.m., and the children will go to school by 8 a.m. So these grandparents that are doing the job of dropping up and picking up children, if you have to have employed a driver, how much will you pay? if I had to get a nurse to take care of my sick child, how much will I have paid over 5 hours? So these are things that could give you an idea of the contribution of older person to the family, to the community, and generally to the society at large. I think that's the way we look at it. It's going to be very specific to every situation, and it's not going to be something we can sit here and bring about a parameter that will cover everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great way to tie up the panel. Please join me in thanking the panelists. They're wonderful talks.